Today on No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Kramer.
Now we flip the script on that and we just come up to real time because I don't know that if you go to work for a high official in the government that you become a eunuch today, okay? That's a good thing. But what we do know is this, is that there are many people, a man or woman, spouses, dating people, that they give themselves entirely to work. And the neglect that happens in the framework of a marriage or a dating or a courting relationship, with fiancés even, and all of those types of things here. It is a huge mistake, gang. And so for those of you that are farther down the road in marriage, please understand that the effort that it takes is still there, is still necessary, and there is no season of your life where you will escape that. As long as you're together, you have a responsibility, and don't make the mistake of putting work first.
He showed his love, taking the cross for us. No greater love than innocent blood.
Welcome to No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Kramer. Our study in Genesis picks up today with the story of Joseph. Throughout his life, we see a man who endured great difficulty and pain, even though he had a heart to follow and obey God. Whether it was being rejected by his brothers because of envy and jealousy, and having his family torn apart when they sold him into slavery, or being falsely accused by his boss's wife and getting thrown into prison because of it, Joseph always had the encouraging reminder that God was with him. Even in the midst of darkness and the depths of despair, he always trusted in the sovereign hand of God, knowing his love would never fail. At the end of his life, Joseph could confidently make the bold declaration to those who hurt him, "You intended to hurt me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people." And now, here's Pastor Jeff as we continue our study through Genesis.
You say, listen, this area of flattery, this speech, the lips of an immoral woman, that they drip honey. This is something that it's seductive, it's drawing, and the taste that is upon it there, it's an alluring thing. He tells him in verse number 4, he says, listen, don't get off track, because in the end, she's as bitter as wormwood. And this speaks of the calamity and the sorrow that follows in sexual immorality. He moves on down. Verses 7 through 14, we find that in these things, in this area right here, that there is the consequences to sexual sin that are spelled out. And in verse number 8, he says, remove your way far from her and do not go near the door of her house. So he says, don't toy with her. Don't flirt with her. Don't go down this direction. Why? Well, verse 9, lest you give your honor, your dignity to others, and your years, this is the seasons of your life, to the cruel one. He says, lest aliens be filled with your wealth, that is your strength and your ability. He says, don't do it. And he goes on down and he says, and your labors go to the house of a foreigner. This is, again, the aspect of like a painful toiling is what this is talking about. And, verse 11, and you mourn at last when your flesh and your body are consumed. Hate to say this, but this is what the text actually says in the Hebrew. It speaks specifically of the man's genitalia and something happening there. So maybe today we would call that an STD. I'm not sure, but that's what that's all about. And he does give some remedy here, though. If you want to see the right use of sex, he gives that to us in verses 15 down through 20. And I love this. And I'm just a man, so I'm a simple guy. But I teach the Song of Solomon here in a very flavorful way on Wednesday nights. It is absolutely a mature adult setting in here when we do that. But he says here in these few verses, he says, drink water from your own cistern and running water from your own well. Should your fountain be dispersed abroad, should your source of satisfaction just go anywhere. He says streams of water in the street. He says, let them be only your own and not for strangers with you. Now he gives us a euphemism here. He says, let your fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of your youth. I'll let you pour your mind into that. As a loving deer and as a graceful doe, let her breast satisfy you at all times. And always be enraptured with her love. Always be intoxicated with her lovemaking would be a literal translation. He says, for why should you, my son, be enraptured by an immoral woman and be embraced in the arms of a seductress? And so we're people, and whether you're a man or woman, this is geared towards speaking to men about women, but you can take this and flip the examples on the head. And so whether you're married, single, divorced, single by choice or single not by choice or widowed, whatever, please understand that this is Proverbs chapter 5 is one of those chapters that has a very pointed spear end on that, and we can learn a lot from that. Now, as we flip back to our left, and we go back to Genesis 39 here, we find in the middle of this, we understand what is going on here with Joseph. And here's what we don't pick up, or here's what we perhaps, we don't always talk about in this. And that is that Potiphar, okay, this is, who is Potiphar? This is Joseph's boss back here in Genesis 39. And Potiphar, that he was one of Pharaoh's top officers. Okay, now in those particular days, what would take place, what would happen, is that the kings would require, watch, their top officials to become eunuchs, or to be eunuchs, or to become eunuchs. Now, there was a specific application over that in many instances, and that was that it primarily held to those that were over the, that were guarding over the royal harem, okay? But a top official was also required to be or to become a eunuch. Very interesting, because we don't see this happening with Joseph as we go farther. And in fact, if this is the case of what happened with Potiphar, right, it doesn't say that he was always that way, but as he rose to the ranks, as he came to that particular spot, if he became a eunuch, if that actually happened, he was castrated, okay, then you could potentially have a wife that was starved for love and sexual affection because her husband gave himself, watch it, don't miss it, because her husband gave himself entirely to work. Now we flip the script on that, and we just come up to real time, because I don't know that if you go to work for a high official in the government that you become a eunuch today, okay? That's a good thing. But what we do know is this, is that there are many people, a man or woman, spouses, dating people, that they give themselves entirely to work. And the neglect that happens in the framework of a marriage or a dating or a courting relationship, with fiancés even, and all of those types of things here. It is a huge mistake, gang. So if you've been married for a long time, I'm telling you, this ministers to me. I've celebrated, 32 lovely years with this lovely gal over here. I mean, how special is that? You know, God brought us up, when we were, go Jesus. I mean, we're both so young, and so here we are in our 40s. No, I kid. But we've had 38 years together. We started dating at 14 to 15 years old, and man, we've come this far, and that's a blessing. It's a rarity, but maybe some of you have traveled that same distance as well. All that to say is that may we understand that no matter what season of marriage or relationship that we're in, that if we give ourselves wholeheartedly or entirely to work, that is a huge mistake, and it costs us, and we may not recognize it in the actual moment. There's a thing that is happening, and I think I'm putting the emphasis on thing. There's a thing. It must have been a year ago. I think there's a few of you in here that have been to marriage retreat, come up and sat through the marriage retreat with me. But there's that phenomenon, something that became popular, and I don't know where it stands as of this moment, but a few years back, it was called Gray Divorce. It was the most popular segment of our society that was getting divorced, and it wasn't the newlyweds. It wasn't those that have gone 10 years. It was those that have already raised kids. It's Gray Divorce, that you're on in life, you're on through your career, you're on through all of this stuff. And watch, when we give ourselves entirely to work, we reach that point, we wake up, we look across to the person that has traveled the decades with us, and we're looking at that individual, and why we're familiar, and why we've got a great partnership of working things out. It's like, well, who are you? Two hearts, because they've done life so long in two different avenues that just like this guy, if he gave himself to that, if he gave himself to become a eunuch, if that's what happened with Potiphar, that there was a wife that was back home that was starved, and we don't often talk about that side of this story. We more frequently focus on Joseph, and Joseph's the main character, so we need to put focus there. And just adding a little bit of amplification or application, if you could say it that way, to some of those things that we need to be careful from. And so for those of you that are farther down the road in marriage, please understand that the effort that it takes is still there, is still necessary, and there is no season of your life where you will escape that. As long as you're together, you have a responsibility, and don't make the mistake of putting work first. Now, for those of you that desire to go in the ministry, I don't know if there's anybody here that fits the category, but I will tell you this, that there is a saying that has been around the church for decades. I didn't make this up. I don't know where it came from. Maybe you can fact check me and Google it and find out. But the ministry is often put to that place of called a mistress to the pastor. The ministry becomes a mistress. It's not that the pastor doesn't forsake his marriage in like physically and tangibly leaving, but because of the needs that are spread out, because there's too many needs. I mean, whether we're reading the Gospels and seeing the early church in the book of Acts, or the ministry that Jesus had, with his disciples and all that stuff, there's too many needs to take place. And so I'm teaching you something here right now that I didn't realize I was going to teach this to you here. But by show of hands, have you ever had an emergency within your life? Raise your hand up so I can know. Pretty much all of us have had an emergency. And has Jesus ever left you in those emergencies? Sometimes you might be like, well, where is Jesus? I don't know. I mean, I know he said he's not going to leave me, but I don't feel like he's here right now. Because of the nonstop need that there is in the body of Christ. And there's always a lack of resources here when that human need is present. Sometimes your emergency doesn't make it my emergency. In other words, there are things that I have to attend to on my own home front in order to keep myself in the ministry. Is that a good word to say? Right? But Jesus has never left you, not even one single second. Not 1 second. And so if you don't get me for 2 hours, or you don't get Justin for 2 hours, or to the next day, or to whatever that is, when you're in the middle of something, please understand, that doesn't mean that we don't care about you. But it might mean that there is another emergency that is happening that is maybe more pressing than your emergency, or there might be a personal emergency that is going on that we're tending to. And so if I don't respond to your emails, or I don't immediately respond to your text messages, don't think, oh, pastor's ticked off at me now and he's such a jerk and all this. Think the best about me. I am just like you. But may we take away the lessons that are there. They're real lessons, okay?
Well, Jeff, it's been a great study so far, but I've heard that there's something special happening in the fall this year. Can you tell our listeners a little more about what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. We're doing the fall marriage retreat again this year in Breckenridge, and it's going to be really special. My wife Jody and I, we just celebrated 32 years of marriage, and we've always enjoyed discipling married couples. But this year, we were hit with some tough times. You know, that word cancer became a reality for us. My wife literally had a softball-sized tumor removed from her body. And so after all of the surgeries and the treatments that we went through earlier this year, we were just unsure that we would actually be able to do the marriage retreat again. But the Lord ministered to us one morning and gave us the theme for the retreat. It's keeping marriages together when everything is pulling us apart. Wow. And what I thought would hinder us from hosting this year's marriage retreat, all the trials, is actually the catalyst for this year's retreat. God wants to bring fresh hope for those struggling and celebration for others.
Wow, that's really powerful. And it's exciting to see how God is really ministering to you through those difficult times. So can you tell us a little bit more about the retreat details?
Sure. The details are October 18th through the 20th. That's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's in Breckenridge, Colorado. And here's the best part. You know, the cost per couple for this whole entire weekend, it's only $450. That's an incredible price. It includes a conference. It includes a mission. It includes 2 full breakfasts here, Saturday morning, Sunday morning. It takes care of all your lodging, a couple's gift basket, and parking. And so we hope that you guys can join us for the 2024 Calvary Marriage Retreat.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm grateful for the ministry God has allowed us to take part in. It seems like there's such a great need for marriage discipleship in our culture these days. Those details again are October 18th through the 20th in Breckenridge, Colorado. Cost is $450 per couple, everything included. Spots are limited and expected to fill fast. And so if you would like more information, feel free to text us the word retreat to 720-354-6485. Again, that's RETREAT to 720-354-6485.
So now I'm going to bypass something. If you would, we're not going to put it on the screen, but if you'd like to see Jesus talk about eunuchs, he actually does mention 3 different categories there. Matthew 19 and 12. I won't read it to you, but it's there. Let me give you some practical considerations here as we start wrapping this down here now. Practical considerations. Let's understand the scene that we're at. That Joseph is in the middle of a very difficult thing there as a young man. Surely, a guy where testosterone is still brewing quite heavily there as his late 20s or whatever. But if you could notice this from Joseph's vantage point, and maybe we could take away this statement. Again, this is special considerations here. For me and you, we can learn from Joseph that our environments do not determine our state of mind. In other words, it's God's word that is a grounding factor with how we walk things out. It's not our environment. Our environment does not, what's the right word? It does not dictate the morality that I am to walk out. God dictates what that is. And so my environment does not determine my state of mind. Second thing is a special consideration here is this. Now, let's look at this through the eyes of a wife. Again, we're just seeing Potiphar's wife here. We're not elongating on her very much. But just understand that for a Christian, whether you're a man or you're a woman, for a Christian in a bad marriage, listen, hear this, that misery is optional. It's optional. I'll tell you why in a moment. The third thing, again, some practical considerations here is, again, now we're going to the married. I cannot change my spouse, but I absolutely can influence them. And we see that even in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 7, I believe is what it is. You know, he speaks about, Paul speaks about a home that is divided and a believer and one believer and one non-believer there. And he speaks about what the special blessing that is. We've read it here within, in some overtones here, right? We've seen Joseph, you know, that because of his presence there, that there was a blessing that was upon there. Now, you cannot change your spouse if you've got a bad one, but you can influence them. All right, the fourth one here. And this would go to all Christians, and that is that my beliefs affect my actions. Now, if I'm continually coming to the table being defeated, pessimistic, and nagging, please understand the results that I'm going to get by carrying those emotions and spoken words to the table, that you're going to be hindered along the way. Okay? This one, for me, this is a huge one for me, because I am just like naturally like a, I call myself a realist, but maybe my version of reality is not really real, if that makes sense. And so this one's a huge one for me. But my beliefs affect my actions. And then the final one here is this. And again, take this, and this is a warning. We can apply this to all relationships. But if we're in the framework of a marriage, listen, if you're verbally critical of your spouse, you're going to put them through a slow and a painful death until the relationship is destroyed. That is a warning right there. Now, if those seem to be a little straight, well, they are. They're guardrails to help us. But maybe I should make sure that I lace this in here with the biblical truth. The Bible says this, that our thoughts and our actions are to be governed by God, regardless of our circumstances. Now, let me show you this in Philippians chapter 4. Take a look at the screen. Here's what it says. We've got 2 verses here. He says, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Notice what we're doing. He's talking about our thoughts. He says, think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Next slide. Keep putting them into practice. So now we're moving from what we think to action. Keep putting them into practice, all that you learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. We can understand this. We can recognize this. This is good for all Christians, for the entire church. That's an epistle. Philippians, Paul was writing there. It's an epistle. It's Christian living. And so regardless of our circumstances, that we are able to take our thoughts and to take our actions, and we're able to filter them, run them through the grid of God's word so that we come up with the right thought and the right emotion, which creates the right action. We should understand that. And so often in the framework of just any type of counseling, it's really just straightening out these things where we've gotten away from God. That's what we come back to. Now, it's not always easy, I understand that, but it is God's aim for our life, is that we would recognize that. Final thing is this, and we close with this, is the last idea, and that's the test. Let me read to you the remainder of the chapter, verses 11 through 23. I'll do it out of the NLT. It goes on, and it says that one day, however, when no one else was around, when Joseph went in to do his work, that she came and she grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, "Come on, sleep with me!" exclamation point. And Joseph, he tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house. And when she saw that she was holding his cloak and he had fled, she called out to her servants. Soon all the men came running. "Look," she said, "my husband has brought this Hebrew slave here to make fools of us. He came into my room to rape me, but I screamed. And when he heard me scream, he ran outside and he got away. But he left his cloak behind with me." And she kept the cloak with her until her husband came home. And then she told him her story. "That Hebrew slave that you brought into our house tried to come in and fool around with me," she said. But when I screamed, he ran outside, leaving his cloak with me." Now, Potiphar, he was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. And so he took Joseph and he threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held. And there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. And the warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. You see that theme again. And so this is the big test here. And this is the final lesson for us. And that is staying faithful when we're accused of doing something wrong. You know, for pastors, we generate a lot of hate mail. It's emails or online fan reviews. You know, in fact, if you scroll through our fan reviews, you'll see some, and some I've answered publicly intentionally to give a straight line, so that some folks wouldn't think that their position was right. You know, there's some good wisdom in the Proverbs. Let me see if it falls upon my brain here as I stall for a second. When a wise man contends with a fool, whether they laugh or rage, there is no peace. Proverbs would even go on to tell us that don't answer a fool according to his folly, but do give an answer lest he seem to be wise in his own eyes. In other words, don't use his tactics back on him, but make sure you're giving a straight answer in that. There's great wisdom for us in these things. But the lesson is that we would out-preach our critics, if you will. We would outlive our critics, that we would stay faithful even when accused of doing wrong. And Joseph, without question, this guy had been dealt a bad hand for 10 years plus at this stage of the game. A few more years left to go. And whether it is his family, his brothers, his boss's wife, his fellow servants, everyone seemed to have jacked him at this point in his life. It seemed like God didn't see or God didn't care. Something like that was going on. But how did Joseph respond? He remained faithful through all of that. And gang, that is the takeaway lesson for us, to stay faithful, to remain faithful. And I want to close tonight that way. Stay faithful, because God does see and God does care. And soon you will be rewarded. There will be an answer to everything that goes on.
That's all for today. Join us for our next broadcast of No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Kramer, weekdays at 10:30 a.m. No Greater Love is an outreach ministry of Westminster Calvary and is supported by listeners like you. If you would like to partner with us, please text any dollar amount to 84321. We would like to personally invite you to join us for our weekly worship services Sundays at 8 or 10 a.m. and Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. We are located in Westminster, Colorado, on the northeast corner of Church Ranch and Wadsworth Parkway, near the Vasa Fitness. If you're not local, tune into the weekly live stream on our web campus, app, Roku, or on Apple TV.
Have you downloaded the free Westminster Calvary app yet? You can stay up to date on coming events, join a small group, request prayer, and watch live worship services. Just search Westminster Calvary on your favorite app store today. Lastly, we're a church that's ready to serve you. If we can do so, give us a call at 303-223-4640. And remember, there's no greater love than when Jesus gave up his life for you and me. Thanks, and God bless.
Taking the cross.